Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our PNW Cross-Border Days of Solidarity kickoff discussion. My name is Julie Buona, and I am the director of the Washington Fair Trade Coalition, which is a coalition of 70 Washington labor unions, environmental organization, farmer advocacy, migrant defense, tech privacy, and lots of other social justice-oriented folks advocating for a just and sustainable global trading system. We're really excited to have folks here uh, for this community recap and debrief of the 2026 Washington legislative session and discussing how we build power beyond the legislative session, including through our Pacific Northwest Cross-Border Days of Solidarity for a People's Trade Agenda campaign. Um, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Duwamish tribe, and we honor their stewardship of this land, past, present, and future, and recognize that the fight for economic justice and trade justice is deeply interconnected with the fight for Indigenous sovereignty and environmental protection. So I encourage you to take this acknowledgement a step further by visiting realrentduwamish.org and contributing rent to the original stewards of this land. So the way that this program is going to go, we're going to hear from a handful of organizers that have pushed forward community priorities inside and outside the legislative session over the past couple of months, from the millionaires tax to tech privacy to farm workers' rights, environmental protection, migrant defense, etc. And then we'll open the floor to a larger community conversation about any other updates folks have, any questions, and a conversation about how we build power beyond the legislative session. Finally, we'll be announcing our Pacific Northwest Cross-Border Days of Solidarity organizing campaign and how you can get involved as an individual and as an organization. So with that, we'll start with some remarks from folks. The first person we're going to have speak is Emma, who is representing the Balance Our Tax Code Coalition and who's going to talk about the millionaires tax that was recently passed.
And I'll kind of cover three main questions that just kind of come up when we talk about the millionaire's tax. And then, as questions come up, but hopefully this will give you a good overview. So what is the millionaire's tax? What income is taxed and who will pay this tax? This stuff I'll kind of cover broadly. In the simplest terms, the millionaire's tax is a 9.9% tax on household earnings above $1 million per year. So if you're making $1 million exactly a year, you will not be paying this tax. But folks making, let's say, $2 million a year would be subject to a 10% tax on that extra million above that first million. So it's for ultra wealthy folks. What income is tax comes up as a question. So it's on the receipt of taxable Washington state income, the 9.9% tax that is. The millionaire's tax provides a standard deduction for $1 million annually and a charitable deduction about $50,000. So if your household makes $1,500,000 each year, it would only apply to that $500. So in this case, it would be a 50% tax on that $500, approximately. But then thinking about a charitable deduction, if you tribute at least $500 to your local charity, then you would pay zero in taxes, in this millionaire's tax. And then who will pay this tax? So, like I said, it's on your earnings above $1 million a year. So, it's a very select few, lucky few, I would say. So, around 20,000 of the wealthiest individuals and households in Washington state would pay this tax, which is less than 1% of our state population and state tax filers. And it's also going to impact folks that are residents of all incomes or of this income and non-residents of Washington state that derive income and annual profits from above connected to Washington state. So you can hear about like professional athletes and things. Just to note, It exempts people who sell property, so selling your house will not impact, you will not have to pay this tax. And also selling like a small business, those are also exempt. And that's kind of the meat and potatoes of the bill, but I'm happy to talk more in Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emma. I know such a big, credible coalition push for this and super exciting that we're finally kind of getting out of like the bottom however many states on tax code. Exciting to see that being pushed forward. Thank you for that. And yeah, certainly as folks are think about questions and things to ask. Again, I pasted the questions in the chat. I'll read them really quickly before we move on, just in case folks aren't seeing the chat. But the questions are, how do we build solidarity around the particular issue, tax code, tech privacy, migrant rights, whatever it is? How do we organize with each other to get everyone's movement needs met? And how do we movement build on this particular issue and these issues beyond legislative session? Awesome. Thank you, Emma. I will now pass it to Maya with Washington People's Privacy to talk about some of the tech, tech policy that was pushed through the legislative session. Let's go for it, Maya.
Cool. Hey everybody, can you hear me okay? Okay, cool. Um, my name is Maya Morales, founder of Washington People's Privacy. Founded this organizing entity in 2022, late 2021, after we won a ballot initiative campaign in Bellingham, Washington, to ban face recognition tech and predictive policing by our city. And that got me really fired up about, people's wins, people's democratic wins, and doing really direct democracy. And have been in this space ever since, have also tried to push that in runs for office and tried to do some inside-outside organizing. This year has been wild. Washington People's Privacy's really main mission is to lift everybody's advocacy, regular everyday people's advocacy on legislative issues and tech justice issues, really like across levels of government. So local advocacy, state advocacy, and sometimes federal and even international, which is how I started dipping into to work with trade justice, because really realizing that all of these things are really intersectional. I want to just briefly say that in terms of the balance our tax code and the millionaires tax, one of the things that I've consistently, even from a tech justice perspective, realized is that, if we're not taxing the rich, like we don't have money for all the other things. Like we don't even have money for data privacy laws. Oftentimes in Washington state, laws just fail because they have a fiscal note and we don't have enough money for all the things. And so like it blocks us on every other issue. So just really like connecting some dots there to like upside down tax code with like all the other stuff we need. Taxing wealth is vital. So I just want to connect that. This year, I think everybody is pretty aware that we have a tech billionaire problem, and that we have all of these, tech bro billionaires sitting at tables with lawmakers and authoritarian leaders. And even in our own nation, this is becoming less and less democratic and more really sort of we're techno surveilled. It's affecting our democracy. Even we had Marianne in the chat. I don't know if everyone who joined a little later can see it, but post um, I believe it's an op-ed in the Sentinel, the Orlando Sentinel, about Iran. Oh, I'm mixing up the papers, but there's an Iran paper here. Um, and I just, I want to lift up the fact that in Seattle right now, like today, there's a war tech convention happening at the convention center. This is like, I mean, I'm not lifting up that, but like, we just for our awareness, I mean, even just in our own state, we have so much big tech and war technologies have been brought home. And so we're seeing this with Palantir. We're seeing with the tech that ICE is using. We're seeing that even at the state level this year, we had to fight several things. We had to fight against the ability for police officers. We found buried in a bill for missing persons a Fourth Amendment overrun, where police officers, in the course of their regular, like everyday community caretaking functions, we're being slipped into this bill the ability to initiate wire communications and electronic communications on pretty much anyone that they found, was reasonably suspicious, which we all, those of you who do any kind of anti-carceral work know that that's a broad category. So we shut that down. It took a lot of effort, but Washington People's Privacy took the lead, and we made sure that we had to go up against the King County prosecutor in a pretty heated meeting with lawmakers and kind of shout them down a little bit about the Fourth Amendment. But we managed to do that, which was great. We also defeated, I don't know if you all have heard about age and ID verification laws, but this is a really big deal. It's been a big deal federally, and we've been fighting against bills like COSA. There's been this whole push to use children's safety as an excuse to really pass these draconian, crazy surveilling laws that will require everyone to do a face scan, possibly scan their government IDs just to use the internet, just to use even like Zoom might become one of these, right? If we see these bills passed. And so there's been this big push to do this federally. We've managed to shut that down year after year there. It came home to Washington State, and for the past 2 years, we've had to shut it down. And shockingly, it was actually a bill pushed by our Attorney General's office. And so we really had a fight there, but we coalitioned up and managed to stop that this year again. And then there was also a fight this year over automated license plate readers. So a lot of you have probably heard of like Deflock Me and the movement to get flock out of our cities. We've got a bunch of amazing folks working locally who've managed to shut their flocks down. And so part of a coalition to try to pass a bill that would actually reduce harm. We're very unhappy with the result that was passed and pretty vocal about that. And to us, part of the reason we're so vocal about being unhappy with the bill that was passed, that was SB 6002, is because of solidarity, right? Is because of understanding that, like, if we're building movement together, one of the things we all have to really do when we get into coalition is think about the folks who are most at risk, most targeted, most harmed by state surveillance, and get into formation with solidarity with those folks first. And so we will continue to work in that area. But just to give you a couple snippets of things we're fighting for, and then just to lace this together with all the folks who are here, really viewing tech justice as a key piece right now in building solidarity and also safety and security for us to continue to organize and fight. And so I'll put some information in the chat later, but thank you all for listening to that a little bit longish blurb, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Maya, and thank you. Yeah, lots of pieces of solidarity there that we'll certainly get into in the discussion, but I appreciate you. Um, okay, great. So we also have Edgar Franks here from Familias Unidas por la Justicia. Edgar, if I can ask you to come off mute and talk a little bit about what you and community to community were working on at the legislative, during the legislative session and kind of where those different pieces are today and how we can build solidarity beyond that.
Yeah. Hello everyone. Good to see everybody here. Um, yeah, well, this legislative session, our priority was to pass SB 6045, which was a bill that was gonna allow PERC, which is the Public Employees Relations Commission. It oversees like grievances and like elections and stuff like that. We were calling for that agency to oversee and recognize unions that were going to be organized by farm workers. Since national labor law excludes recognition for farm workers to unionize or collectively bargain, this bill would have allowed for that to happen. Um, the bill, I think, had been 2 years in the making. There was some kind of language issues that at first prevented us to drop it last year, but we felt this year it was to something that we can pass. And I think we're looking back at all the years of success that the union have had and the farm worker movement had had in general of passing progressive laws that little by little were giving more and more political power to farm workers. Um, But unfortunately, that for this year, that bill did not pass. Even though it had passed all three committees, the Ways and Means, the Rules, and the Labor, which we thought we were gonna actually get a lot more opposition from. It made it all the way to the floor calendar. It just that from what we were told that they weren't gonna bring it up for a vote because they didn't feel like it had enough votes to pass. Which I mean, whatever, but we felt that at least we should have got the opportunity to have that bill debated and see who was actually against it and who was for it. Um, but we're not like, I mean, it's unfortunate that it didn't pass, but it gives us momentum or something to fight for next year and for these upcoming months and really build a case of why we need more and more unions to protect workers. And I think for all the reasons that were just mentioned about the millionaires and the accumulation of wealth that's just been kind of disgusting to see and people hoarding money at the expense of regular everyday working people. Unions have always been the force that has equaled the playing field. We obviously want stronger union protections and recognition for everyone, but also strengthen uh strike laws and boycotts and everything, and like all these tools and tactics that can be used to really help fight organized capital. These are things that go hand in hand with union recognition. So, in no ways would a bill, if there was like a negotiation that had to happen for a bill to pass, that would like weaken strikes or boycotts or anything like that, we would never, never, ever sign off on anything like that. Um, I think it's this last year, I mean, 2025, obviously, and heading into this year has been tough for everyone. I mean, obviously, with the deportations and detentions, everybody has known somebody or taken part in an action that where somebody has that we know personally has been affected by it. So we feel that instead of kind of retreating and kind of playing on defense. We felt that this bill also would help strengthen workers and their ability to fight back against ICE and detentions and all that. I know in our case, when one of our members was detained, it really helped having the union and the labor community and the immigrant rights and migrant justice community come out and support. And that was because the union had built relationships with all these other folks that wanted to see farm workers and immigrants protected. And that kind of is the solidarity that I think that being in a union really, really helps. And also just having an organization where farm workers can go to. In our area, it's primarily Mixteco and Triqui or farm workers who are indigenous. The union is run by indigenous Mexican people. So it's like one of the few resources the Mexican indigenous community has to go to in case like their family members are detained. So, much more than just like bargaining for rights and for one workplace. It actually unions have a ripple effect all over the community as being a resource for everybody. So yeah, I think that for next year, hopefully, we get those couple of votes or convince those people that kind of were on the fence to really be on the side of farm workers and immigrants, especially at this moment. So, but congratulations to all the other folks that did put in work and got the millionaires tax passed and the privacy stuff. I think all of that is, really, really helps us build um the movement, the strong movement that's interconnected for the long haul. So yeah, I think we our bill didn't pass, but we're glad that other people's bills passed that help us get that momentum that we need for this long fight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Edgar. And yeah, I mean, it's all interconnected, right? Super, disappointing to see. And I agree with you in terms of like it, I think bringing it to a floor vote, even if it necessarily doesn't have all the votes, is important to know who is not voting for it and why. But again, yeah, it's just part of the movement and certainly um, sometimes takes years, unfortunately, to push these things through the legislature. And in the meantime, we do the actual work on the ground, right? Um, Okay, great. Just a couple more folks to give remarks before we move into our community discussion. Noah, if you could come off mute, Noah's with Buy-in and Migrante, would love to hear about your organization's kind of priorities in the past few months. Thank you for being here.
Hello. Yeah, my name's Noah. I'm from Bagong Alyansang Makabayan. That means New Patriotic Alliance in Filipino. But we're a comprehensive alliance that includes workers, migrants, youth and students, etc. Um, yeah, for us, we have a really big priority in like the grassroots mass movement building. So we might actually be a little different in that like our legislative work is not necessarily our primary focus, but we do understand it plays a very important role too. But that being said, we there's like a really large priority in being on the ground, understanding the daily situations of our communities, and especially our migrant worker communities as they're being really impacted. I think just to share, some of the legislation we have historically endorsed and supported is like related to the Philippines and the military aid that is sent from the U.S. to our country. I'm actually hearing a lot of similarities to like the worker repression, repression of farm workers, surveillance. You know, I'm seeing how our international community is also impacted locally and how millions and millions, even billions of dollars is sent to our communities to repress our people. And, we really are opposing bills that are opposite to that, some of which that actually just recently got passed, called the PERA Act, which is sending hundreds of millions to the Philippines to do similar. But that being said, locally, we've really been doing a lot of work to build the Defend Migrants Alliance. Um, some of the things recently we've been doing is like pushing moratorium on evictions, especially for migrants, but also trying to work with more particular progressive legislators, to see if they will take a stand for these migrant worker communities that we've been working so closely with. And that has been pretty successful thus far. Um, in the past year, we've actually been able to successfully release 6 Filipinos from the Northwest Detention Center through our advocacy work, and have also been able to share those lessons with other communities through the building of this Defend Migrants Alliance, where now we're seeing more and more non-Filipino migrants also being released, and people being able to connect with their communities and get them out on bond and etc. Um, yeah, but that being said, I think through finding these shared campaigns, these shared issues, and like, what are our shared economic and political interests and our shared enemies, we've been able to really have quite a successful year in terms of growing the mass movement. I'm not sure if people are familiar with Llewellyn Dixon or Max Londonio, but those are 2 Filipinos that we were able to fight to be released and really amplify um, their stories while they're in detention. And since then, we've been able to really engage groups that we have not historically been able to engage in these political issues, such as what is happening to our migrants. So like unions that have not historically been connected to these struggles, now they're speaking out and they're joining in these alliances. Healthcare professionals, faith communities. I think all that is to say that every different sector or community has a role to play in taking up these issues. And we also view legislators as a part of that too. And, how can we galvanize our communities with the information on the ground to really push forward our agendas? Um, so yeah, that's what a lot of our work has been focused on. And, for us, we are seeing just the impacts of the community. There's so much fear. There's so much of the driving forces that forces people to leave our communities in the first place. Um, such as the military aid I was mentioning, or, in the Philippines, we're also fighting in the legislature for a family living wage because the daily wage that people are getting is so small compared to what is actually needed to provide for us. And then what are we seeing now currently? This attacks on Iran, the increasing prices of oil and gas. Even here locally now, we're feeling the impacts quite strongly. And what does that impact for our livelihood? So, you know, uh, I think just like a plug for the Defend Migrants Alliance, we definitely, if people are interested in learning more, we would like to share more. But um, yeah, we just have so many shared interests, shared targets as well. Like with these large corporations like the Geo Group that are detaining our migrant workers and making money off of it, like corporations like Boeing that are implicated in this defense industry and these bombings that are happening in countries like Iran and the Philippines and Palestine. And then also these AI corporations like Overland that are here locally. There's so many intersections in our work. So how can we build more solidarity? And for us in the Philippines, our belief is that winning our own struggles and our sovereignty of our homeland really contributes to the struggles that are happening here as well. Because we see it with our farm worker communities, with our migrants that are being impacted, etc. So yeah, I think that's the main thing. Just wanted to focus on in the sharing, but yeah, we have just a lot of rich lessons in working with different communities in this past year that we're excited to continue sharing and waging shared campaigns together.
Great, appreciate it. Thank you so much, Noah. And yeah, Defend Migrants Alliance is doing incredible work on the ground, freeing people from detention, and been really incredible to see that. And again, like you said, there's so many places of intersection and overlap between our work. So that's why these conversations are super important. Finally, before we move into our community discussion, I would love to invite Drew from 350 Washington to talk a little bit about the environmental piece and kind of what was moving in the legislature and how else 350 is tying into all these issues.
Great. Thanks. And hello, everyone. So my name is Drew, and I'm a volunteer bill tracker for the 350 Washington Civic Action Team. Affectionately, we call ourselves CAT. So just to give some context, this team's mission is to educate and empower people to advocate for strong, sound, and just climate policy while also strengthening partnerships and relationships. So what this really means is that we have a team of folks who track bills, and we have a team of folks who take that information and create actions based on those. So we're actually concentrating on quite a few issues and quite a few things throughout. So we don't have a specific number of bills to talk about, but I do want to talk a little bit about how we do this. So we do this by creating a low access barrier action alerts on multiple digital platforms, primarily email. And during the legislative sessions, we send 2 email action alerts a week to our list of action takers, which are essentially people who've signed up for these emails. And in these messages, so we provide tools, talking points, and clear directions for our members to take effective action. So, just to give you a little bit of a sense, our priorities include legislation in the following areas: housing, forestry, recycling and waste management, energy, the built environment, transportation, water, salmon, and air, and social and economic justice. As we've sort of mentioned already, notably, as a group, we were disappointed to see legislation like the data center bill fail, even with the united support and efforts across environmental and climate justice communities. And also, regrettably, none of our priorities passed in the recycling and waste management or the salmon, water, and air policy areas that we were focusing on, specifically in recycling and waste management. The bottle bill, which would have established an extended producer responsibility program for bottles and cans in the state, similar to other California and I think Oregon. And also, we were advocating heavily for improving our plastic bag ban law in the state. But again, regrettably, those didn't make it. It's been a tough session, as already been noted a few times here. But, of course, there were a few highlights that we were definitely advocating as well. Millionaires tax that's been already mentioned. A few housing bills, such as allowing housing in commercial and mixed use zone, and some energy bills like removing a tax exemption for the replacement of equipment in data centers. Um, so, our team has experts in a lot of fields on the team, but we also rely heavily on community-led organizations like other groups on this call to help guide our recommended actions. And in addition, all of our priorities are also vetted through an internal equity filter. And, when we talk about overall impact, we like to say, we can say that we mobilize over 500 unique individuals this year to a collective total of 79,000 legislative actions. And that includes committee sign-ins, written testimony, and even live testimony. So, like I mentioned, not a lot of the policies that we advocated this year made it to the governor's desks, but we did manage to expand our network and raise additional awareness on important policy initiatives. And finally, 350 Washington works year-round with climate justice organizers and community groups to help identify upcoming legislative priorities. And frankly, I think this is one of the key components of this work that helps ensure the community voices remain a priority in everything that we're advocating for. And finally, I encourage everyone to sign up for these alerts. It's on the 350 Washington website. And if you are more interested in getting in depth on what policies we supported and all of that kind of stuff, we are having a legislative wrap-up session on April 20th, and I can put more info in the chat.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Drew. Yeah, I really appreciate too what you said about, like even if legislation doesn't make it to the governor's desk, right? Like there are so many other wins that we can get through that. So that's all really great. Thank you all so much for our amazing speakers, giving some remarks specifically, where all of these places connect. Would love to kind of move into our community discussion, whether it's like questions you have for the speakers, maybe legislative priorities that weren't mentioned, how we build solidarity. Just really want to kind of open up, right? Like these are the very conversations we need to be having as we build power. We'll do let me paste the questions again in the chat for folks to have. Please do raise your hand so we can make sure that everyone, is able to speak. You should be able to find that function if you go to the reactions button or react button. There's a raise hand feature, or if you're on a phone, you have to tap them more. Or if you can't figure out how to do it, which is fair because I think Zoom is always shifting around. Zoom is pretty motion activated. So if you have your camera on, just like wave and I'll be able to call on you. So yeah, let's kind of open it up. I'll kick it off to Maya first because I see you have your hand up. But yeah, folks could kind of be thinking about how do we build solidarity? I know a lot of our speakers have mentioned that already, but let me stop talking. Let me open it up. Maya, go for it.
I just wanted to supplement a tiny bit, and I'll put this in the chat as well, because I see Odalis is here from UFCW 3000, and I didn't have really enough time. We worked on so many bills this session. My brain is on overload, but we also worked to try to pass a surveillance pricing bill, and would love to hear where that fight is going because we didn't manage to get that. Like the farm worker bill that died and didn't get brought for a vote. It died and didn't actually go to rules. It died in fiscal committee because it had a big fiscal note. But basically, it's one aspect of the food justice fight, right? Like we have these big grocery, um, you know, moguls, I guess, controlling our food access and the prices of our food, and they can literally do surge and surveillance pricing and change people's prices in grocery stores live, like at the register, at the shelf. It's pretty nutty. So we tried to fight that this year and we didn't get it through. But I know that fight is not over. And then I also want to lift up Tony, who's doing alternatives to military service work with Walk in Peace and Justice, because I saw you here. And yeah, I just would love to invite folks to talk about that work too and how they see that as fitting into this solidarity.
Yeah, I can give a very quick update. I actually don't think I'm not leading that work anymore, so I'm a little out of the loop. But basically where we left off, our bill did not make it out of appropriations, and so it did die basically. However, what we want to do is try a different strategic approach around community and exactly what we're doing here today. More coalition building and definitely talking through community and involving more pieces. There's more moving pieces to this bill, right? Like Maya said, it's not just about AI in the workplace, but like, yeah, let's talk about food justice and how that's not fair for certain people to be paying higher prices or lower prices for certain items, right? So, I will definitely be able to loop back, Julie, and then we maybe we can put it like in the summary for next steps. We want to get a coalition going. We it's all in the starts of it. We haven't really like nailed down everything. But would love to follow up on that.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, that's the point of being here together. So yeah, absolutely. And I'll mention it too for anyone else on this call. Like if there are ways that folks can get plugged in, right? Like the point of this is kind of like moving beyond legislative session. What are we doing? Whether or not we secured wins on specific pieces of legislation, like community work still needs to be done. So please like let me know and I can send out any information in the recap. Other thoughts about solidarity, other pieces of legislation? I know it's a lot to think about, but yeah, Selden, go for it.
Yeah, just one thought to throw out there is that it seems to me that especially with a bill, for example, the farm worker legislation we were hearing about earlier, if we could build up some momentum before the session begins, I think a lot of groups, at least like ours at 350 Seattle, could could get some momentum in terms of phone calls and emails to legislators before the session, just so they start to feel the pressure early. Once the session starts, everything is so chaotic. So if any groups here have bills they know they're going to be pushing for in January, you maybe start in September to mobilize and notify all the groups here and ask for support in terms of emails or phone calls ahead of session. It's just one thought.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I appreciate that. And yeah, that kind of goes into like how do we organize to make sure everyone's movement needs are met? So maybe there are, organizations like 350 that have more of that kind of structural, system in place to like reach out to people and get all of these, like Drew mentioned, I mean, tens of thousands of action takers, right? So like maybe it's making sure that, those connections are made so that folks, can kind of get access to that system. More interconnected communications. Thank you for that. What else are folks thinking? And this is obviously like an ongoing conversation, and I'll get into that in a couple minutes here of like where we're taking this soon. And this will certainly not be the last place that we have these conversations, but yeah, curious what folks think. If folks did other work, what work your organization is currently doing and where you need support, that kind of thing.
I'll just plug, I feel like kind of we talked about this in the chat, but like tax justice really is at like the root of a lot of like every single issue kind of does tie back to tax justice. So it's and revenue issues in Washington State. So if this is something that like or if your organization has like been hit with like one of those like really was it like bill killing fiscal notes and things like that, we have like a ton of policy folks that have navigated that before, and we try to kind of build those like I don't know, build those like organizing tips and also policy tips at the Balance Our Tax Code Coalition. So if you're interested in joining our coalition, we organize year round. So I'll put my email in the chat, and always looking to add more people to this effort.
Thank you. And yeah, again, another kind of connection being made there, right? Like we said, a lot of these bills are being stopped by our regressive tax code. So Uh, great connection to make. I see a question from Norm in the chat. What are we going to do about the Democrats in Olympia that sabotage our bills from climate to rent stabilization? What are folks' thoughts about that? Folks that have had experience maybe working with Dems that seem to maybe not have the most community-oriented approach.
Okay, I'll stop yapping after this, but I think this is a really interesting question because, like, before I've done coalition work before and it was in healthcare, and so it was like, it was very values driven where there was a lot more like first thing bipartisan like buy-in. And so with revenue, it's been so interesting because we fully are just talking to like the Democratic Party. We don't even schedule meetings with Republicans because we know they're pretty like party-wise, they're in alignment on one side and we're trying to move people on this side. And seeing all the different factions of the Democratic Party has been huge. And just really eye-opening because I thought like, oh, Democratic trifecta, here it is. It's a bop in. Like we'll win as soon as we start, asking them to do this work. And that's not been the case. So just lessons learned about working, with the Democratic trifecta is really talking about like for with taxes, it's what do taxes pay for? It's like the ooey gooey brownie that's on the box of brownie mix that's just otherwise brown powder. You're talking about the thing that you get. So talking about your guys' priorities when you're talking about tax justice and or the things that your representatives really care about. So like if they say that they're K-12 champion, well, why aren't you funding public schools the way you should? Or things like that really help narrow down the conversation and really kind of put them in a place to be tax champions. And the other thing is that like I've been kind of noticing too, like with taxes and revenue work and this highly political and similar with rent stabilization, I would say like these kind of two things that really you see the different divides of a progressive versus a maybe more like moderate Dem, is also seeing like who they listen to. So like what communities are they listening to? Are they talking to like local businesses? Do you need to leverage like, leverage those local businesses in your area? Sometimes it's also just a different member, like a seatmate or a different member on their committee. So getting that intel really helped us kind of figure out who we needed to pinpoint and how we can approach them in a successful way.
Totally appreciate that. Curious if folks have other thoughts on that. And also uplifting Edgar's question about going to the Washington Dem convention. I certainly have never been to that, but Maya, go for it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, 100% get them out, primary them. I think it's all too easy for many of us to stop talking like about this all year round, right? And to just talk about this when it's already too late. And the fact is that the Dem machine is like year round, and the time to interrupt and to get good folks into office is way in advance, way before filing week. Like literally, it's in, November of the previous year, practically. It's like right after elections wrap up for the previous year, the next one's coming. And that's kind of when you have to start planning to try to primary people. And the other thing I want to say is like, we do have to build power outside of the Dem party, in a way that does still influence it. So it's tricky. I think Edgar's question, I was just about to answer it, and then I was like, I don't know if I should write this down, but literally, like, it takes so much energy just to be in the local Dem spaces. Haven't, gone to the conventions yet. Um, and maybe this is about, building these solidarity networks, building people who can be sort of like stand-ins. I feel like when you are a directly impacted person, sometimes being in these spaces is a lot. Like I ran for office 3 times, served in office once last year. Um, and I felt like a queer Latina punching bag like most of the time. Like it's just hard. I've been in an active like Dem party participant locally for 5 years. And like finally after last year's run, I was like, I got to sit down. Like I got to take a break from this. Like this space can be really toxic. So I think knowing that and like knowing that that probably is consistent across local parties around the state, probably in other states too. We all know this with the DNC. It's like really obvious with the National Dem Party, but I think we need to start building a toolbox, I guess, for us to figure out like, well, how are we going to flip tables then? Like, if it's so hard to just be one or two of us in these spaces, how are we going to sort of like deputize folks with privilege to go into these spaces and flip tables with us and be in solidarity and figure out how are we going to like build some power both alongside and then like using the party structure. I think, Working Families Party has a lot of potential to be in solidarity with movement and with labor, um, with directly impacted communities. It isn't really functional completely without the Dems yet, right? So like there are all these ways where I think like we have to not expect Dems to just show up with the right position because the fact is class is actually the winner here. And it's really about directly impacted and poor people and working families and working class people having to draw out the enemies, right? And sometimes those are mainstream Dems. So just my 2 cents on that.
Totally. Thank you so much, Maya, for that. And I feel like we could keep going on this conversation forever. And we certainly will continue these conversations, but I would love to take the time. Thank you so much for everyone for contributing to that and with questions and thoughts and all of that. But I would love, I don't know, Maya, if you purposefully did this segue, but it was incredible when thinking about, right, like you know, who are our allies and who are our enemies. And so really wanted to kind of take all of these contributions and thoughts and questions and weave them into, our Pacific Northwest Cross-Border Days of Solidarity campaign. So in the last few minutes here, I want to talk a little bit about like action steps, right? Like if folks feel inspired after this call, like how do we kind of keep this movement going? This is a way to do that among many other ways. So just for a little piece of like, the Washington Fair Trade Coalition, our focus is trade justice. We know that trade policy is inherently intersectional. We haven't talked a lot about it in this call, but what I will say is, we know that it's something that requires cross-sector coalition building and solidarity work. All of these systems of oppression are interconnected. Taking some of these pieces from this call, right? We know that like our migrant neighbors that are being abducted off the street and subjected to unimaginable violence, a lot of them are here because of the economic devastation of free trade and corporate power in their home countries. Our farm workers who are fighting for their rights are up against a corporate agricultural model that has been empowered by free trade and neoliberalism. The tech surveillance and rise of discriminatory AI is being made possible through giveaways to big tech and trade agreements. The destruction of our environment is compounded by free trade systems that give corporate polluters the ability to sue governments for common sense climate policy, and so on and so forth, right? All of these systemic inequities are exacerbated by inequitable trade and economic policy. And at the same time, the very people who hold the power and who are often, attempt and are often successful in like rigging policy on the local level, the state level, the national level, and the international level, they're also attempting to pit working people against each other so that we're looking anywhere but up. And frankly, like folks have had enough, and that's kind of what inspired our Cross-Border Days of Solidarity campaign. As we speak, the governments of the US, Mexico, and Canada are actively negotiating new rules for the global economy. It's called the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, and essentially our current administration and others are pursuing just another rigged agenda that puts the interests of billionaires and corporations ahead of working people, family farmers, the environment, in North America and beyond. And this has like very real consequences. Again, we've talked about some of them today, but there was just a recent report that came out that showed that the North America Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, which was a predecessor of this current agreement being negotiated, it's been around since the 90s, and it has literally shortened Americans' lifespans by on average a year, but sometimes more, kind of depending, right? So like trade policy is quite literally life or death. So in response to all of this, communities are coming together across borders and across issue areas to say enough with rigged trade, and beyond just a rejection of the status quo. Our Days of Solidarity organizing is also a celebration of these very conversations, a celebration of solidarity across borders and across issue areas, and a celebration of the power that we hold as a community. So I'm very excited to announce that on May 30th of this year, activists and civil society organizations throughout the Pacific Northwest, both in the US and in Canada, will be mobilizing together at Peace Arch Park up at the border in kind of a show of solidarity to reject the attempts to pit working people in the US, Mexico, and Canada against one another, demonstrate our shared interests, which include good paying jobs, a healthy environment, sovereignty, and so much more, and demand that governments actually prioritize the needs of the people and communities ahead of the power and profit of corporations. And this is kind of like a part of a larger call across the three countries for cross-border solidarity. So again, that's Saturday, May 30th at Peace Arch Park. Of course, especially under this political climate, it is not safe for everyone to travel to the border. We completely understand that. We think it's an important show of solidarity with our partners up in Canada, but we will absolutely also be hosting various watch parties and lots of other ways for folks to get involved in this organizing in a safe way that keeps them and their communities safe. But yeah, really excited about this. Lots of folks here on this call are part of a kind of like cross-sector organizing committee that's been planning this mobilization and celebration on the 30th. And I hope you all feel inspired by this conversation to kind of join us in this call. There are a few things you can do to get involved that I'm putting in the chat now that I will also be sending after the call to everyone here. The first thing being, come, right? Join us on the 30th. It'll be a powerful show of solidarity and a celebration of community. So that's the first link, the Solidarity Days RSVP. If you are part of an organization that you think would be interested in either participating in any way, like whether it's mobilizing people up, organizing, being part of the organizing committee, whatever that looks like, please bring it to your org and have them officially endorse it. That's the Solidarity Days endorse. There's also a petition, tri-national petition actually, like where workers and community members are signing from all three countries, and that petition will be delivered to negotiators around the Days of Solidarity events. So that's a way that right now you can get involved as an individual. And finally, and like most importantly, is like help us spread the word, right? Help us go into community and have these solidarity conversations. In the lead up to the 30th, we'll be hosting a series of kind of in-person Trade 101 educational events throughout the region coming to a city near you. So stay tuned for that. Send this to your friends, send this to folks who are interested in solidarity work. And I have my email there in case you have any other way that you would want to get involved. So I know we're pushing up on one, so I will close that here. But again, thank you so much for joining our call for cross-border solidarity. And I hope you all feel inspired and want to come celebrate with us on May 30th. So thank you all so much. Bye.